Good evening. Tonight we'll be discussing the Henry Nowak case. Western societies have become so weak, so immoral, and so terrified of offending favored minority groups that justice is now inverted in real time. We don't reward bravery or champion masculinity. We do not castigate cowardice, nor sufficiently punish crimes. We do not demand gratitude, restraint, or moral assimilation from foreigners. We don't cultivate manliness, discernment, duty, or moral seriousness in our own people. Lies, callousness, violent crimes, diversity bromides, and the ritual humiliation of white victims has filled the moral vacuum. I think that the Henry Nowak case is the most egregious and obvious example of this in my living memory. So first, for people who may not have seen the video, it's extremely disturbing. I'm going to play it because it's relevant for context. So I'll bring it up and then I'll discuss it afterwards. So this is the Southampton Times body cam footage from the events of that night.
My dad's told me.
Oh.
Right. He keeps dropping side to side, so I'm just trying to keep him set up.
All right.
He's got a mouthful of blood. I don't want him. I can't breathe. He was on the bin on the other side of this gate.
So somebody said he keeps dropping and trying to keep his head up, talking about Henry Nowak.
He's jumped over these fences and stuff like that. And
Right.
he's up
Move
here.
away, mate.
He's obviously fallen
Right.
from there and he slipped from there.
There's other shooters left over there, mate.
What's your name, mate? Huh? Has anyone been hurt other than him?
Yeah, me.
He's grabbed my brother. He's took my turban off. Started grabbing my head.
Are you injured?
Yeah, I've got swollen eye, little bruises.
All right, just step back a little bit for me. Someone flag these down.
Got this stud.
Right, let's get you out of there, shall we? Oh.
I was in bed asleep. Whenever you find me up there, look, someone's attacked me.
I can't breathe.
Grab his other arm.
Help. Come running around the corner.
What's happened to you, all right?
This stud.
You've been stabbed? Whereabouts? Don't think you have, mate.
That's what, and then I'm like, you've got nothing. I want to keep you up.
Hand?
I can't breathe.
Put the hand in the cuff, mate.
Yeah.
This is like
can't breathe.
times this has happened to us. You've been walking, you park, everyone else. Multiple times we've had people racistly
90
attacked
foot.
us, nothing happened.
He's saying he's been stabbed, so
Where
let's
is it
just
you
check
think you've
him.
been stabbed?
He hasn't been.
In the face? Oh no, but we have to check, don't we?
Right.
In the face?
Just get these back off, get their details and that, and I'll keep hold of him.
Should we?
Right, keep you on your side, mate. You better retrieve then. Saying to him, keeping him on his side. We were set up when we had him here, but he didn't like it. What's your name, mate? At the moment, you are under arrest. That's for assault, so you do not have to say anything, may harm in defence. If you do not mention when questioned, it's up to which you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence, all right? It's going to be sick, I think.
Yeah.
What's his name?
So I just want you to call it.
Yeah, we've got this male. He's
Just-
been beat up. Are we able to get an ambulance, please? His pupils aren't even reacting. Yeah.
Okay, so that's obviously horrific and hard to watch, but it's important that people understand exactly what happened. So the first thing that any person with an IQ over 80 and basic cognitive function would have noticed is that Henry is obviously dying. Now, the police had been called that night by a neighbor who had reported that Henry had been stabbed. They also received a 999, that's 911 in the UK. They'd also received a 999 call saying that there had been a victim of a racial non-crime hate crime. Or I can't remember what Orwellian language they used to describe these insult crimes. So the murderer and his family concocted an elaborate scheme to trick the police into thinking that the stabber was victim of a hate crime. So the police showed up with these two different calls and attended immediately to the lying murderer. And as you could see, Henry was lying in the gravel. And initially, somebody was holding him up, and then they put him down in the gravel. He had blood in his mouth. He said over and over again that he couldn't breathe. He said that he had been stabbed. He had a face wound, and this is important because they pixelated his face. Presumably, they'll say that it's for the sake of the families, but personally, I think it's to cover up the fact that he had an open wound on his face, because one of the places he was stabbed 5 times was on his face. So seeing this scenario, the police showed up and they still treated him as the suspect. The alleged victim of the thought crime, hate crime, whatever, was standing there. He was perfectly fine. He didn't have a scratch on him. He was, pointing to a non-existent bruise above his eye. So the point is that this situation was not subtle. The racism allegation overrode visible reality. I don't think that anybody could objectively look at that video and draw any other conclusion. So we see that Henry was stabbed. We know the neighbor called 999 to say that he had been stabbed. So the police had that information going in. Digwa, the murderer, his side claimed a racial abuse attack, whatever that might be. The police accepted the framework of the murderer. And then Henry was read his rights. He was arrested. He was handcuffed, and he was dragged through gravel while he was dying. His repeated pleas were completely ignored. He was mocked, actually. I don't think you have been, mate. Imagine being the victim of this crime, and you have the police show up, and you think that you might get some relief and some help, or even maybe just hold your hand as you pass away, and instead you're mocked. I don't think you have been, mate. So not only was Henry murdered, he was slandered, and he was treated as a suspect while he died. I'm going to bring up a quote from somebody. It was on a Facebook post that I wrote about this, and I thought it was interesting, and I don't know the background of the person who wrote this, but let me bring it up here for you to read. So I imagine that this person might have been a policeman in the past. It's Alistair Milton. So he was replying to my post. In policing, the ABC primarily refers to the foundational, investigative, and interview mindset. A, assume nothing. B, believe nothing or nobody. And C, challenge everything. So assume nothing, believe nothing, and challenge everything. This mantra ensures officers and detectives avoid cognitive biases, thoroughly scrutinize statements, and properly corroborate all evidence. Not followed in Southampton, though. And then somebody replied, without fear or favor, simple principle, officers are expected to follow the evidence, exercise their judgment, and uphold the law equally, regardless of who's standing in front of them. That principle has served our country well. Then a third man replied, they are specifically trained to see color and religion and give it priority. Like our government, they fear tensions and also seek our ballooning ethnic minorities as voters. Another person replied, the last words he heard were, I don't think you have, mate. We are not angry enough. So I think that kind of sums up a very good overview of this situation from the perspective of what I am assuming are Englishmen, just based on the way that they're writing, and perhaps some of them had been law enforcement in the past or currently are. I don't know. They'd probably be afraid to write that if they were at the moment. But it's absolutely, soul crushing to see this unfolding. And people might say, because I focus on things that are happening in other countries, not just in Canada, even though I'm, primarily focused on Canada as a Canadian. And I focus a lot on the Anglosphere in general because we have a shared culture. And then I focus on other countries more broadly that are part of Western civilization because we have a shared continuity of values and culture. We're not all exactly the same. But what happens in the UK is also happening here. What is happening in Canada is also happening in parts of the US, so on and so forth. So if you look at Australia, you'll see the same patterns. If you look at Western European countries, you'll see the same patterns. So I think that this example of what happened to Henry is very important, not just for Brits, but also for all Westerners, really. So the police showed up. They didn't follow the ABC standard protocol because that no longer exists. So instead of assuming nothing, they assumed a racist allegation was true. And instead of thinking that perhaps the person who called in that there had been a stabbing victim was telling the truth, they assumed that the murderer was telling the truth. Instead of believing nothing, they believed Digwa's side. Instead of challenging everything, they only challenged and dismissed Henry, even though all of the physical evidence was right in front of their eyes. So this was obviously an investigative failure, if you could even call that an investigation. It didn't even require investigating. It was an emergency situation that required emergency management skills. But more importantly, it was an ideological failure because there could be no failure that big and that deep and that glaring if there wasn't a total ideological capture of every person who was there, every person. And then more importantly, it was a crushing moral failure. And it's important to note that I had incorrectly last week said that they were all still on duty. One of them has resigned. Only one has resigned. The others are still on duty. So these, at best, most generously described police, incompetent police, that's the most generous interpretation, are still out there responding to emergency situations. It's really something. I'm going to bring up another post. I'm going to try to keep it together because I'm pretty angry about this. Okay, here we go. I just have to double check because sometimes I make mistakes. I'm on my own. I don't have a producer or anything. Okay, so I'm going to play this video here.
Cannot get any more shocking. Well, here we are. Breaking tonight, police at the centre of the Henry Nowak scandal reportedly tried to intervene during his killer's murder trial over fears about what people were saying online. According to the Sunday Times, the Hampshire police wanted to issue a public statement during the trial to combat what they called misinformation surrounding the case. But prosecutors warned the force, that doing so could risk jeopardising the integrity of the trial itself. And tonight, the revelations go even further, and I would suggest even darker. The paper claims officers wanted to portray Henry Nowak as the aggressor in official statements released after his death, despite having evidence proving this was not the case, before changing course following what I would say is justified outrage from his grieving family. Police.
So, in case you didn't follow that, what he said was that even after the police knew that there had been no racism, well, I mean, arguably there was a lot of racism, but it was towards Henry, the victim. So even after the police knew that there had been no racism from Henry, from the victim, they still were planning to go ahead and lie about it to the public. It's really absolutely astonishing. And it's very scary because in this case, the police are saying that they wanted to counter disinformation, but who's putting out the disinformation? Is the public? I mean, there was almost no transparency. And I know that the UK has a rather unusual, they cover cases a little bit differently than happens in terms of the press in Canada and in the US. In Canada and in the US mostly they have totally open courts. I think it depends state by state and maybe case by case, but you know, it'll be on film sometimes and the reporters are free to report, I think, in most cases, especially high profile ones, unless there's a reason to have a closed courtroom. And in Canada, reporters are allowed in and they can report as the trial is underway. In the UK, reporters are allowed in, but I believe they're not allowed reporting on it until I'm not sure if the judgment has to be submitted or if it's after the Crown has rested their case. I can't remember the defense, but there's a quirk. So what ends up happening with high profile cases is that there's kind of a flood of processing of everything that happened, like right after in a really quick period of time. So it's quite astonishing to think that during the case, the police would have put out basically lies. So from this, we see that it wasn't only a catastrophic failure at the scene, but the post-scene narrative management really matters. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in terms of how crimes are managed after the fact, because it doesn't always go the way that the public understands. So yeah, I guess my question is, why are police so worried about disinformation when they had acted on the killer's false story, right? It just doesn't add up. And there's this response every time that there's a really glaring example of ideological capture in our institutions. The politicians will go out and behave as though the public anger created the scandal, but the police conduct and the killer's lie created the scandal. The public going onto the streets and having a sense of righteous anger about what happened is an appropriate response. I'm not encouraging anybody to riot, obviously. I don't believe in violence. However, their voices need to be heard, and it is entirely appropriate for everybody to be furious about what happened. So reframing the narrative as though the public are the bad ones is absolutely, like, it's like government sociopathy, really. So I'm going to play another clip. Oh, I see that. Sorry, I have a really hard time seeing the responses because I think I might need glasses, but I try and read them because it is a live stream. So Johnny Tight Lips wrote, "It's also insane and unnecessary, yes." And Squirrel Nuts wrote, "Enough is enough. It's beyond time to rise warriors. The same people are responsible for cover-ups." I'm thinking we're almost at the point, and then I can't read the rest. I'm sorry. But yeah, I mean, this righteous anger, this frustration is completely understandable and appropriate. And it would be really strange and sociopathic if people weren't angry. Like, you would have to wonder. So here, I'm going to play part of the 999 call. That's 911 for North Americans.
Police emergency.
Yeah, we just been attacked by someone racially. Yeah, this.
Right.
He just attacked it. Took his starter. Sorry? Huh? Sorry, we just got attacked racially by some white person.
Right, okay. Whereabouts are you?
We're on Belmont Road.
Just out in the street, are you?
Sorry?
You're just in the street?
Yeah, literally. I just parked up my car to come home and he's attacked my brother.
Are you talking about verbally or physically?
No, he physically attacked my brother. We're Sikhs, we wear turban and he's just attacked my brother.
Have any weapons been involved?
No.
Okay,
Leave him 1 second. I'm calling the police. Leave him. We'll restrain him, please. Sorry? Sorry, what was that?
Right, okay. Is that person still there?
Yeah, we're restraining him right now because he's just attacked my brother and took my brother's turban off.
Hold on.
Can we have
Tell me a
someone out
number
here, please, ASAP?
Yeah, you can. Tell me a number you're outside of, can you?
No, so Belmont Road, down the police station. Pardon?
Okay, I've got you. Stay with me.
Okay. And he's also recorded some as well on his phone. So can we please have the police out here urgently?
Yeah. Listen, I'll get someone there straight away. It's not going to delay anything now. Just bear with me. I need some details, okay? So just answer some questions.
He's verbally attacked my brother racially. He's attacked my brother and took his turban off. Then he's recorded it on his phone thinking he was going to do something. So I need someone here ASAP, please.
I
we're restraining him, so I'm not letting him. I can't let him go until this gets sorted. I'm not being racially attacked and letting this get away with.
Okay, listen. What's your name?
Henry Digwa.
And your date of birth?
Uniform.
Okay, I've got you on the system. Let me just get it sent
I'm not having this as a regular occurrence. I live here.
No,
I'm not having this as a regular occurrence.
That's fine. I agree.
Listen to how indignant the lying brother is. Just a filthy liar.
Just bear with me and let me get it sent over to the control desk and we can get someone on their way, okay?
Thank you. He ain't fighting people, he's racially attacking people. That's what he's doing. Nah, he sees some brown people. That's what it was.
Has your brother got any injuries? I know they pulled his turban off.
We don't need no apologies. We're waiting for the police to come. They're on their way.
Just talk to me.
Yes.
Has your brother got any injuries or have you got any injuries?
I haven't because I've just come back to my brother. My brother's had his hair pulled and stuff. The guy has fallen over because he looks like he's drunk and he's fallen over and he's hurt his face. He also recorded my brother when he was about to attack my brother. So I want this please to be sorted. We've just come back from town, parked up to go home, and this is what's happened.
All right. Just stay calm. We get officers on the way, all right?
Yeah. I haven't got any footballs. No, I've called the police. The police are on their way. The police are on their way.
Okay, that's enough of that. There's a longer call with more flagrant lies if you're interested in listening to it, but I can only stomach so much of it myself. So there are many lies told in that. And for people who don't know the whole story, the mom came, the mother of the murderer, and she took the murder weapon. And then the brother, you just heard him calling the police, saying that Henry was a drunk, basically, and had racially attacked his brother with his mean words. And it was just so urgent. And he even got all indignant, like, I'm not going to stand for this. So it's absolutely astonishing. And Henry was Snapchatting, I believe. I'm not sure which app it was. I think he was snapping at the same time that he was walking home. And because of this, I think it helped. Otherwise, it's possible that nobody would have found out the truth of what happened, because this hex, as somebody, I'm trying to think of who it was, they call it a racism hex. If you say the racism hex, then there's no other reasoning that happens. It just short circuits people's brains, and then they believe whatever the person claims afterwards. So the racism hex was laid. And then after that, it just became about managing the hurt feelings of the sociopathic family, basically. But in the police car, after they were taken in, and they were not handcuffed. They were not handcuffed when they were taken in. It was just the dying boy who was choking on his own blood. He was handcuffed and read his rights, and he was placed under arrest. They were just put in the back of a squad car and they were taken in. And at one point, they were speaking in Punjabi in the back seat. I'm not sure if it's the first time they went or at a different point in the investigation. And they were recorded concocting their lie and corroborating their, figuring out how to corroborate the story with one another about the murder to try to hide what they had done. And the police, had they done their job and had they verified, they would have known that Henry's phone was on the murderer at the time. And they, possibly would have had some questions. But since they ignored somebody who was bleeding from his face who'd been stabbed, I guess that was too much to ask. So since then, there's been a lot of emphasis put on how the murderer and his family, the entire family, were just outliers, just a bad entire family. And that it shouldn't reflect more broadly on other people. And I agree. I don't believe in collective punishment. However, if a community is going to have preferential treatment before the law, and if they're going to be able to summon magical police response just by saying that somebody said mean words to them, then I think that they're held to a different standard. I think that that's fair to say. And if they have a special provision where they can carry around weapons that can kill people, they seem to be considered more honorable than the general population. So it seems to be a standard that they're insisting that they be held to. And there was a live stream after this heinous crime. I'm not sure if it was like exactly what day it was, but it was a live stream, a fairly large live stream, apparently. And I'm going to bring it up because I think that we have to be honest about what's going on here and tell the truth. So one moment, let me make sure that it's up. Here we go. Okay. It's from this account, Basil the Great. I'm not going to play the entire thing.
Normally, I disagree with you, Bobby, but on this occasion, I'm going to have to agree with you a little bit, And this guy here, he's wearing a turtleneck,
Okay, for context, this was, I believe it was on TikTok, a TikTok space that was mainly Sikh Brits who were in it. That's my understanding. And there was a well-known kind of media personality, let's say, who was in the space.
When people are wearing turtlenecks, they mean business, man.
Exactly, brother. Exactly. You wouldn't get normal people wearing turtlenecks
Yeah, you wouldn't get normal people wearing turtlenecks. It's just
like that over a shirt with a
It's like
tie.
Stone Island.
Yeah.
It's very businessy, very smart, and that's scary. If someone like that,
it's scary when someone comes up to you wearing a turtleneck, or if they're wearing a tie and a suit. Ooh,
threatens you, it's serious, man.
it's serious.
And
I don't know if you
doing his
noticed,
hair-
but if you look at his eyes, he's very, very cold. His eyes are like he's looking in the mirror. He's flicking his hair.
Sinister.
It wasn't. Look, I didn't get the right vibe from that, and I suspect the police were thinking twice about releasing that video because it didn't show this little boy who's looking in the mirror, getting ready to go out. It looked like he was ready to go out to kick off. And that Digby was the first guy that he saw, and he just didn't realize that Digby Singh was armed.
what the Kirpan is for, to fight oppression,
Yeah, the oppression from somebody wearing a turtleneck.
to protect. This is what it's all about. So
Rumor has it that they played a football match the day before and they lost the football match. Like a university tournament, so they lost the match as well, a football match. So maybe just wanted to take it out on someone.
More evidence.
Really? That would make sense. Something dumb. Something really, really dumb.
Like this conversation.
Guys, press 1 if you think the Singh was in the right. Press 2 if you think the Singh was in the wrong and Henry was in the right. So 1 if you believe that Singh was in the... Which way did I say? Fucking, I've lost my train of thought here. 1 if you're in support of the Singh. 1 if you're in support of the Singh. 2 if you're in support of Henry. Obviously, Henry's no longer around, but, it still counts. So, guys, can you just start collecting the votes, please? They got 10 more seconds. 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, fine.
Can you put a 1 in the comments if I should piss on Henry's grave, or 2 if I should shit on his grave? Thank you.
Very noble and
Okay,
honorable.
votes are in, guys. I'm sure most of you fucking don't need the results, but for the point of fairness,
Press 3 if we should get rid of all
The
the
votes
Polish
are
from
in.
Britain.
The 2s have won. I would.
It was press 3 if we should get rid of all the Polish because he's half Polish.
Shit on Henry's
Press
grave
3
when I
if
go to
we
the
should
UK.
get rid of all the Polish from Britain. No Polish people.
okay, so 92% voted in favour of the Singh. This poll
They're
will now, the
saying
results will be
The
delivered to
Singh,
the jury.
not the sink.
Whenever they're going to be, conducting whatever they're going to be conducting the next session. So I'd like to say thank you to all of the participants.
Bobby, let me talk about my vote. 100% of the votes voted for shitting on Henry's grave. I will do that on live.
Imagine being buried as well. What's going on?
So it goes on. I'm going to mute it. But they go on at one point and they say that he was running his mouth, and people who run their mouths get killed. Basically, that's basically what was said in slang. So in terms of community reputation, because after this happened, everybody does the meme, right? So the Norm Macdonald meme about terrorists. So everybody does the meme where they come out and say like, oh, this couldn't possibly reflect poorly on Sikhs. It would be so terrible. I'm going to make the argument that when people are running spaces like that are recorded online, that they're trashing their community's reputation themselves, and that murdering someone and lying and slandering the boy that you murder is probably doing more to tarnish your reputation than people reacting to that. And mocking and agonizing death of somebody we don't do that. We don't do that here. That's not what we do in the West. We don't do that in Western Christian countries. It's considered to be outrageous, disgusting, and in horrible taste. So that's also going to reflect badly on the community. If you care about your community's perception, then maybe you need to upgrade your behavior. So what always amazes me is that then we go into the narratives that are about the dangers of telling the truth, basically. That's the next danger. And at this point, I'd like to mention something that popped into my head. I'm afraid I'm going to forget to talk about it. But the politicians were saying that Elon was, interfering with UK politics, and I think he was, and I think that that's incredible. And thank God that there are a few people that influential who are interfering in British politics. Because if people like Elon Musk were not driving the story, because he gets very fixated on certain topics, and God bless him for that, because he'll just post about the same thing for a few days, and he has a very influential and massive account, obviously. And because people like him drive certain stories out into the public, then the legacy media is forced to report on them. So I think that that's incredible, and I'm grateful. He did the same thing with the grooming gangs. I've known about the grooming gangs, I don't know exactly for how long, but at least 10 years. I want to say closer to 15. I learned about them through Mark Stein, the great, I call him the GOAT all the time, the greatest of all time, my favorite Canadian writer, political writer. I learned about them a very long time ago, and I have been telling people about them since. And for the longest time, people thought I was cuckoo because it's so outlandish. Like, how could you possibly believe that there would be that level of institutional capture to the point where little girls were being sexually tortured from the 1980s onward, and the institutions were covering up and in some cases helping to feed the victims into the grooming gangs. It's really hard for the average person to wrap their head around that when we've had high trust, high functioning institutions, for over 100 years in Canada and for much longer in the UK. So anyway, I'm going to try to circle back. I got off on that tangent there, but to bring it back, I guess, to the topic of community blame, and you can't have it both ways. You can't have special laws where you can carry weapons and then you murder people and nobody calls into question the laws. You just can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways of saying we don't want collective guilt, but then go into a space where it's all people from your community background, and then you're behaving in an abhorrent manner. Absolutely disgusting, disgraceful, distasteful. You can't have it both ways. So either we have laws that apply equally to everybody, or we have what we currently have, which is like a little hellscape of fiefdoms of competing minority groups, where the state is like a puppeteer that's trying to engineer some kind of harmony within these competing groups and trying to orchestrate some level of hierarchy between the different groups. I don't think that that's sustainable long term. So to clarify, obviously, because I can already hear the not every Sikh. Yes, not every Sikh. Some of my best friends are Sikhs. They don't behave this way. There's no issue. They're not running around with swords in the streets. Okay, they're just normal people living their lives. So it's not an issue. But people are going to notice when there's a cover-up, an attempted cover-up of a murder, and the institutions are on the side of the murderer because of alleged racism. And then we're also going to notice public celebration and mockery of the victim of a heinous crime. So I guess that'll bring us into the point of equality before the law. I don't believe, in my opinion, firstly, in Canada, we are not able to be armed in public. We can have guns, but there's very strict ways that you have to transport them with certain locks. You have to have certain indicators on the license plate. You have to have a license. It's very controlled. Fine, everybody accepts that. But the one exception to this rule is that in Canada, Sikhs also can have knives, and they can even take them on the airplane. Now, given the fact that the largest terrorist attack in Canadian history was the Air India attack you would think that that would have been forfeited as an idea, because this notion that Sikhs are superior to everybody else and can therefore have weapons that the rest of us can't have is forfeited when you blow up a plane full of people, because you're showing people that there is an ideological drive among at least some of you. But that doesn't matter in Canada. You can still carry around this weapon, and apparently it didn't matter in the UK either. You can carry around the weapon. So this religious and cultural exemption and these types of exemptions create unequal status before the law, and they create unequal access to lethal force. So if everybody was armed, then I wouldn't be making this point. But since we're not, I think it really matters, because people don't have the capacity to defend themselves. And it's also going to create fear. So if you're concerned about the minority group being negatively impacted in terms of perception, I think being afraid of people that could knife you, that would be high up on the list. I'm just going to check in on the chat because I can see I missed a lot. I can't see. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time reading. I need glasses at this point. I'll admit it on the live stream. The only thing they have is to be perceived as a victim. It's the only thing that gives them weight that they in no way deserve. Well, I do think that victim politics is now what we do, the oppressor oppressed Marxism, right? And so automatically people get thrust to the top of the list if they're perceived to be the biggest victim in the room. So people will literally pretend to be part of a victim group, even if they're not, so that they get preferential treatment. We can have jackknives, sorta. We can carry certain types, I think, of knives in Canada in certain contexts, but if we're stopped having them, then we have to have a reason. Like, you can have a hunting knife if you're going hunting, but I can't carry a hunting knife to walk my dog if I'm caught with the knife. I think that that's the nuance in the law, but I'm not a lawyer, so don't listen to me at all. I don't think people should walk around with deadly weapons, especially if they're mentally ill or if they're liars. Seems like that was a twofer in the case of Digwa. So bringing myself back on track, a religious preference of a minority group doesn't erase public security concerns, right? If a weapon can kill, then it's open to scrutiny by everybody, and you don't get to play a minority or religious card about it. So I consider that to be, it's basically putting group rights above citizenship and above equality before the law. And I think that we've had this slippery slope for a long time in Canada, certainly since the 1982 debacle of that terrible charter that was brought in. So now I want to look a little bit at the courses that the police officers are taking, because it's not just the Hampshire specific ideological brainwashing and context. It's wider, and this is happening in police forces around the Western world. So I'm not arguing that training alone killed Henry, but I think it's important to see what they have looked at. So here we go. I'm just going to bring it up. Okay. It's going to verify it's on, because I have a bad habit of thinking something's playing, because things will play in the background for me, but people don't always hear them if they don't do it properly.
Police needs to resign. Here he is issuing the worst apology in history today.
It's difficult footage to watch, and I really feel for the family of Henry at this time, and I understand their point of view and why they're upset with the police. We have said we are sorry for handcuffing and arresting Henry at that time.
Yeah, that footage was more than just distressing. It's criminal, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about Henry's dignity, as he goes on to say. It was about the unfairness and, frankly, the agony he must have been in. Those officers hurt him. Now, he's allowed 3 of those officers to still be on duty. So what's he playing at? Now, compare that to his apology to the family of Chris Cabba, the armed gangster who was shot lawfully by the Met Police.
Firstly, I would like to offer my heartfelt condolences to the family of Chris Cabba.
I'm just
I can't
going
begin to imagine.
you get the picture, but I'm just going to go ahead to the training
I have
part.
no doubt Henry assumed was there to help him. That police officer handcuffed him.
1 second.
Course.
I
They
should
designed
queue
this
it
in
up. Here we go.
They designed this in conjunction with the University of Reading. Now, here is what police officers are taught. They are educated on organisational culture, biases, banter, microaggressions, privilege, and the importance of being an ally. They learn about the ethical policing principles and psychological safety. They build trust and open communication.
Microaggressions. These are people who are tasked with dealing with some of the most stressful and dangerous situations that any human being could be tasked with dealing with. And they're being taught about microaggressions.
Communication with the
Privilege.
workforce to create meaningful change and embed inclusive policing practices. They also share the 5 Ds of intervention: direct, distract, delay, delegate, and document. But that wasn't enough.
Okay. Lest you think that that's all. Just going to double check this is up on the screen. Okay. This is part of the police anti-racism commitment. So I'm going to read it out. Our commitment to anti-racism means taking a stand against racism in all its forms, proactively identifying, understanding, and tackling racial inequalities in policing, reforming policies and practices that lead to people from different ethnic groups being over-policed, underprotected, or marginalized. What that means is that groups that commit more crimes won't be policed as often, I guess. Working with partners to tackle the racial inequalities that exist in wider society. Like, this is not the purview of the police, and which are reproduced and sometimes exacerbated by policing. Our commitment to racial equity means, this is very important here, this green part, producing a quality of policing outcomes. Okay, so think about what that means. Producing equality of policing outcomes for people from different ethnic groups by responding to individuals and communities according to their specific needs, circumstances, and experiences, with understanding that these will be racialized and with the aim of reducing harm. It does not mean treating everyone the same or being colorblind. In brackets, racial equality. I'm going to read that again. It does not mean treating everyone the same or being colorblind. Racial equality. They are explicit in the fact that policing in an equal way is not part of their goals in this equity framework. They call it equity, diversity, and inclusion in some places. Here we call it DEI usually, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I heard one of their commentators saying, no, this person is disinforming the public because it's EDI, it isn't DEI. Like, come on, lady, come on. So I just find it astonishing that it's just overt. It's overt that they will not police people equally. It's just, there's not even the pretense of it. So the training creates reflexes. I don't think that we can 100% blame the training for such a moral failure, to be honest. But it does indoctrinate the police officers into a certain way of approaching the world if they know, certainly if they know that they're going to lose their jobs if they're, accused of racism. And the other thing is that in the UK, I should have actually queued up some videos for this, but I didn't. In the UK, there are laws such that if a person perceives that they've been racially insulted, then the police have to respond to it. So it doesn't matter if it actually happened. It doesn't matter if something that somebody wrote online actually was racist. If the person who's making the complaint believes that they were harmed by it, then the police are obligated to respond, which is astonishing, really astonishing if you think about it. I'm just going to check in with the chat for a minute. They're combating perceived potential racism with actual racism. Yes, exactly. UN trained agents. Yes, agreed. It wasn't one person, it was multiple people, including the recording. I'm not sure what that means. I'm sorry. I think it was responding to something farther back, and I don't know the context that it was in response to. So a racism allegation is like the most morally urgent situation now in the UK that people can respond to, not a knifing victim. It's not funny, but it's so absurd that I'm laughing at the absurdity. Visible injury is secondary, and equity is just above all. So to make the argument is very worrying, because we know where this leads, that equality of outcomes does not equal equality before the law. That means some people are a little bit more equal than others, right? And so we already see this in Canada with sentencing. We have the Gladue principles, and then we have mitigating factors, which are basically ways of making visible minorities and Indigenous Canadians less culpable for their crimes. That's essentially what it boils down to. I'm probably going to be sent to thought crime prison for that, but that's my interpretation of the law and how it's applied. You can have two people commit the same crime, and if one person has these mitigating factors, like they're a visible minority, their sentencing can be reduced. So that's my interpretation. I think it's accurate. So instead of Lady Justice being blind, Lady Justice is hyper aware. So anti-racism policing, I guess my point in this section, is not colorblind policing. It's the opposite. So we are trying to move at some point towards, I guess, a colorblind society, and now we've moved beyond that. And any kind of disparity in outcomes is treated as proof of racism. So it's impossible to ever really achieve equality in this context, right? Because you need equality of outcomes. So if a one-legged 90-year-old is running a race against me and against Ben Johnson in his heyday, we're all expected to reach the finish line at the same time, because equality of outcomes is now what they're looking for, not equality of opportunities. So we no longer have neutral enforcement based on these criteria. And in my opinion, it's now to the point where an anti-white bias has entered policing, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. And I think my only question at this point is, how long has this been going on? So I'm going to show you this book club now to emphasize that it's also in the wider police culture. It isn't just in their training. It now just seems to be part of what's happening. Okay, so in case people can't read it, so this is Swella Braverman. Her post says, "The rot runs deep. Sussex Police launched a senior officer book club to reflect on privilege and biases, focused on the book Me and White Supremacy by Layla F. Saad. This book is a 28-day truth-telling journey to guide those with white privilege to discover, examine, and unpack their inner white supremacy. All supported and signed off by the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner in December 2024, when Kemi was leader of the party." So this is the memorandum. Sussex Police have empowered senior leaders to lead on anti-racism through a force-wide book club. To embed anti-racist thinking at the highest levels of leadership, Sussex Police launched a senior officer book club focused on Me and White Supremacy by Layla F. Saad. What is this work? This work is a 28-day truth-telling journey to guide people with white privilege to discover, examine, unpack, and dismantle their inner white supremacy. Does it only take 28 days if you're a raging racist? That's my question. I think it would take longer than this how-to book. It is a one-of-a-kind resource for people with white privilege to do the internal, personal work of anti-racism. Its purpose is to educate people with white privilege as to their internalized racism and facilitate personal and collective change to dismantle the oppressive system of white supremacy. So I'm wondering, like, is that just everybody who's white has to do it? Like, how does it work in practice? I would love to know how it is applied in practice. So as we can see, this is a wider police culture. It is not just like one silly DEI training, right? And it's not just in Hampshire. And so these senior officers are spending all of this time reading about this, as knife crime, by the way, is skyrocketing in the UK. Like I want to say over 50,000, I'd have to look up the stats, of stabbings a year. So instead of dealing with that, they're like navel gazing about their own white supremacy privilege or whatever. So it's really pure ideological at every level, and at the higher levels, from the lower levels of responders to the higher levels in policing. Now I want to talk a little bit about the BLM context. I don't think I have. Let me just check. Oh yeah, I'll just put this up just because I don't have any particular videos or slides for this aside from Keir Starmer. So this is an image of him taking the knee after what's his name? George Fentanyl Floyd died in the US. So people may not know this. I'm here to inform you that the UK is not actually the United States. George Floyd was not a Briton. And what happened in the United States had literally nothing to do with policing in the UK. The UK never had slavery, didn't have a legacy of anything related to slavery. And in fact, they ended slavery. They went to war to end slavery. The Britons, they went, you know, they were fighting it on the high seas, you know, but yet somehow they still had the same Black Lives Matter riots in the UK, and their politicians did this crazy taking a knee. And for people who might not know, I am very strong on the topic of police brutality. I'm very against police brutality. I recently profiled last week the victim of police brutality. I have myself been the victim of police brutality. So while my natural inclination is to back people who have a very difficult job, I also know that there are bad seeds sometimes in the police, and I know that there can be cover-ups of bad behavior. So I'm very firm and on this issue. But in the case of George Floyd, he was a drug addict, and he basically tried to swallow the drugs he had on him after he committed a crime in a store when the police came to respond. I don't know if he was planning on spitting them out. I don't remember, but at the time, a long time ago when this began, I read the autopsy, and he had enough fentanyl in his system to kill like a large animal. And he was on another set of drugs. I think he was taking meth as well. He also had cardiac issues. So it's highly debatable. Let's leave it that way. It's highly debatable whether or not the police were responsible for killing him or not, because he was saying, "I can't breathe," before anybody was even on him. I think based on the amount of drugs he ingested. Be that as it may, he was not a Briton. And so there were riots in the UK, the same way that there were riots in the US. They were mainly peaceful riots, though. In the US, many people were killed. In the UK, there were just serious injuries. But they didn't do any kind of thorough examination of how many injuries there were. Whereas with the Southport riots, you might remember Southport was when a young man went on a rampage at a Taylor Swift concert and killed a bunch of little girls by stabbing them to death, and killed and badly injured, he killed 3, and he badly injured about a dozen others, and including, I think, 2 adults, and like their girl dance instructor was trying to protect. It was horrific. It was horrific. Okay. And there was basically a cover up of the information after this. And the media put out this narrative that this man was, they literally put out the narrative that he was a choir boy, like a Christian choir boy. He was so innocent and wonderful. And the public wasn't having any of it. So there were Southport riots because of that. And there were injuries. I think hundreds of people were injured, and the riots obviously were not good. And a lot of the injured were police. And I don't think people should be, I don't think thugs should be attacking policemen or policewomen. But my point in this is that the contrast that there were data sets with Southport, like they were carefully recording every injury, and the media were running this narrative. Whereas with BLM, they weren't recording who was injured. They always use the same language: overwhelmingly peaceful protests, only a violence by a minority. But I know that 172 people were injured in the BLM protests, but they didn't do a wide-ranging study of it. Whereas with Southport, there was accounting, so several hundred people were injured, and so it was immediately framed as an emergency and as a national violent disorder and a disaster, basically. And people that were involved in writing angry posts after the girls were murdered, after the rampage, were imprisoned for their posts, saying that they were inciting violence, but nothing equivalent, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, but nothing equivalent happened to anybody involved with BLM, like Antifa. And there was a lot of emphasis on publicizing the injuries from Southport, but there was no emphasis whatsoever from the media from publishing the injuries from the BLM riots. So I'm just comparing the two tiers, basically. I'm not defending riots. People shouldn't riot. I'm questioning the selective reporting and whether or not there is actual transparency and the selective urgency. And I think that's important to think about. I'm just going to look a little bit at the chat. 1 second, if I can see it. Oh, you know what I'm going to do so I can read this better? I'm going to. That's easier. Okay, look at the people pushing the agenda. Yeah, same gang, NGOs everywhere. That means non-governmental organizations, yes. And the governmental organizations, GOs, are bad. Yeah, so they're chatting among themselves in the chat. That's nice. They're making friends. Maybe they're already friends. So we're going to, oh, this is an important point. We're going to move on to this aspect of this whole terrible situation because it relates to, okay. Sorry, let me just double check. I'm getting a bit, okay, good. So this is a Connor Tomlinson post, and the caption is, reminder, the Department of Justice's Community Relations Service contacts the victims of these racially charged murders and terror attacks to craft their responses to maintain anti-racist and multicultural narratives. So this man may have been coerced by the state. He's not saying he was. But so what he's making reference to are behavioral insights units. Sometimes they're colloquially called nudge units. And I reported on this in an interview. You can look for my YouTube if you want, with John Carpe of the JCCF, where he was talking about the behavioral insights and the way that they were applying basically professional nudge units to try to control our behavior during the COVID regime. It doesn't just happen during the COVID regime. It happens all the time. So it happens when there is a politically charged crime that these people will show up at your home, you think, to have a nice conversation with you, but they're really showing up to manipulate you into promoting the narrative that they want promoted sometimes by guilt tripping, sometimes by invoking the memory of your deceased loved one. There are all sorts of strategies. It's it's highly evil and manipulative. So this is what he was wondering about. He didn't say, I can't say either. I'm not making a statement that the father was manipulated this way, but this would be an example of the kind of speech you hear afterwards, after they've been visited.
I want to clarify something right off the start, because I've already heard some rumors and gossip. This was not a race thing, and this is not a political thing. Please do not comment if you do not know what happened. Do not turn this into a racial thing. It was not. Do not politicize this. It's not. This is a human being thing.
So that's the father of Austin Metcalf. That's in the news right now because the court case is in the courts right now. And I mean, that could be exactly, you know, his opinion on it. That's fine. I'm not saying it isn't, but if you pay attention, you'll hear that this is a really common refrain from the parents of anybody who's in a politicized situation that's getting a lot of news. But in the case of Austin Metcalf, I think that anybody who's been paying attention to that case, they could understand that it's certainly racially charged for people who were defending somebody who murdered somebody for no reason whatsoever, because it happened within the give, send, go, and you could read the comments. It's absolutely atrocious. But I just wanted to make the point that there are these nudge units that are manipulating people in some cases. And then what ends up happening is that you'll hear the press say back, well, you can't have that strong opinion because the father or the mother has asked for this. They have asked for us not to politicize this. So it's a way of manipulating the public and guilt tripping, basically. It's not exactly what we want from our institutions. So I'm going to call up the next issue. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I'm a little slow with bringing up my slides. I do my best. So the next point is, this is from Leo, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, Kiersey, maybe. The caption reads, Pakistani Muslim nonces a girl. That's a slang for a pedo, basically. Nonces a girl gets 2 years. 21-year-old British kid angry that police helped kill a British kid, throws a traffic cone. It hits nobody, gets 3 to 5 years. But remember, there's no two-tier policing. So this is one of the photos. This is the example that he was talking about of a man who groomed a girl who was only 15 years old on social media. Rotherham, one of those, versus I don't think that the 21-year-old has received his sentence yet. But this was the post that I'll read. Just sat in Portsmouth Magistrates Court and watched my son plead guilty for throwing a traffic cone, which was caught on camera from the disturbance at Southampton on Tuesday over the two-tier policing and that poor boy's death by the hands of the police. I don't condone violence towards the police, but my son is only 21 and got caught up in the moment. He informs me it didn't even hit them, just thrown towards their lines. Firstly, it was a kangaroo court. The solicitor informed me before entry that it will be the district crown court judge that oversaw the Southport rioters court case presiding, and with that, he appeared on a big screen once my son came up from the cells. He took his guilty plea, then informed him by the video link, with it being such a high-profile case, his guilty plea, the sentencing guidelines were between 3 to 5 years for a guilty plea of throwing a cone. With that said, he's remanding him into custody and he will be sentenced Wednesday morning. So I think that's this Wednesday coming. I'm not 100% sure. At Southampton Crown Court at 10 a.m. in front of him personally. Now take him away. If that's not two-tier justice, I don't know what it is. And that's a young 21-year-old white boy, full-time job, never been in trouble before, and dealt with that swiftly. And with those sentencing guidelines, I'm still in shock, feeling helpless. So that's from the mom. So we see the fast, harsh treatment of somebody who threw a traffic cone. We don't see the same kind of response with almost any crime, really. So we went over the Axel Ruta Cabana, but I'll just bring up again. I'll show the girls just so people remember the case, because it all feeds in. One case feeds into the next, feeds into the next, in terms of the way the politicians respond and the way they manage the righteous anger about these crimes rather than managing the criminals. So I have a very hard time pronouncing his name. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. It's just, it's hard to pronounce. So it's important in this case, the Axel, I'll just say Axel instead of trying to say his full name, that there was a massive institutional failure. This wasn't one of those lone wolves who came out of nowhere. Okay, he'd been kicked out of school. He had gone to school at least 10 times with knives on him. So he was in an alternate school. There was report after report about him and his violent ideation. He was referred in 2019, in 2021, in February, and in April 2021 for his behavior. Yet there was no channel escalation. There were no interventions essentially that were meaningful. And he was not actually found guilty of terrorism, even though he had made ricin in his bedroom, or at least he had the components to make ricin, which is a very deadly biological weapon. It's like from a bean or something. And he also had uploaded the Al-Qaeda manual twice. Yeah, they said he wasn't Muslim. He was just interested in terrorism. He also used the Al-Qaeda manual for the techniques in stabbing his victims, but they still said it wasn't terrorism, not ideologically motivated, because he wasn't right-wing or Muslim. So make that make sense. So he had weapons, he had knives, he had an obsession with violence, he had ricin, he had the Al-Qaeda manual, and he had a mass killing obsession, and then he went on a rampage. So these were the victims that he murdered in the photos, and the others that were badly injured. You could read all about it. But anyway, so people went to the streets about this because it was horrifying, and people can't live like this, right? You can't live like this, where your little girl goes off to a Taylor Swift day camp and she doesn't come back. Like it doesn't make sense. And the public know that these cases they're not being handled. Like these dangerous offenders are not being handled because there's ideological pressure, and there's especially an ideological push to try to keep a certain representation of visible minorities not institutionalized. So that's something else that I'm researching and I'm looking at. But basically, public anger is fast and severe in these cases, and I think that that's appropriate because the institutions are not doing their jobs. So if they want people to be less angry, then they can, and if they want to say don't politicize tragedy, well, then they can do their jobs, right? And the state already has politicized policing when we think about it, right? So you're not supposed to politicize tragedy, but you've already politicized it through race ideology and created the conditions for the tragedy. So yeah, I'm just going to move on to the next slide now because I realize I've been talking for a long time, and I'm starting to get a little bit tired, and you're probably tired of listening to me speak as well. So just one second, let me find it. Okay, here we go. So this was another case, just to show patterns. This is from the account Truth Fairy 131. The violent African Valdo Calacane I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry, stabbed to death Barnaby Weber and Grace O'Malley on 13th June 2023 in Nottingham before killing Ian Coates and trying to kill 3 others. The Nottingham inquiry heard how Callaghan refused consent for toxicology samples while he was in custody after the attacks, and only the victims were tested for drugs and alcohol. Understand that they were dead. On Wednesday, Grace's father said that it was disgusting that the bodies of his daughter, her friend, and fellow student Barnaby were tested for drugs and alcohol after they were killed, while the actual murderer was not. The Western world is in moral decay. We have two-tier policing, anti-white laws, and a broken justice system. Our cities are war zones, and our people are being slaughtered on our streets. Enough is enough. And these were the 2 of the victims. And then I believe it was a middle-aged man was the 3rd victim in this case. It's very sad. So we're seeing, I'm going to take that down as it's sad. There. We're seeing these patterns. And in the case of Callaghan, I believe that they had taken into consideration the trying to reduce the number of in like mental institutions, whatever it's called in the UK. I think that they were trying to reduce the number of Black schizophrenics, basically, who are institutionalized, to try to align with this kind of DEI medical management. So it's not just in policing, right? It's in all of our institutions, because he had serious mental illness and warning signs. And a lot of violent criminals have mental illness and a pattern of criminality that persists. So yeah, there was like an inquiry about this case afterwards about I'm not remembering what it's called. I think it's called like race and disparity concerns. That's what they call it in the UK, that played into various decision making around managing this man's access to the public. So it's pretty astonishing when you learn all the facts of these cases and you realize that there are dangerous people being essentially loosed onto the public, and these victims, these are avoidable tragedies. And that's why I'm highlighting this issue. It's not because I want to pick on anybody, right? And just the fact that the violent offender was not tested and he could refuse being tested for drugs. And there's this kind of, there's an implication then that the victims were actually, you know, maybe they were on drugs or drunk and causing the problem, even though they know that the guy had this long history of being crazy, right? So the sensitivity is directed towards the offender, not towards the victims. And because of this, policing is losing its credibility. And if you lose the confidence of the public in an institution as important as policing, it has very dangerous ramifications. And I want for that not to happen. And the way to restore public confidence is by things like this not happening. But it also has to happen within other institutions. Like in that case, you know, with mental institutions, right? It's not just a one-prong issue. The last issue I'm going to bring up, just so people understand, bring it full course, because I could do, and I have done, an entire episode before on the grooming gangs, and it's not the purpose of this episode, but it's just to echo so people remember. So this is the account Just Right Frank. This is a response he made to someone. As you are American, let me give you some background about Starmer. Before he became prime minister, he was the director of public prosecutions, which means he ran our CPS, which is the body that decides who is prosecuted under the law in the UK. I'm sure that you have heard of the grooming gang cover-up in the UK. The police once raided a sex party, call it a rape party, but anywhere, where underage girls were being abused by a gang of non-white men. People who follow this will know that the overwhelming majority of the men in these cases were Pakistani Muslims, and the overwhelming majority of the victims were white girls, and they were specifically targeted because they were white. Going back to his quote, the police let the men go, but arrested one of the girls who was 15 at the time. Starmer's team got a conviction against the child, and she was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Now you know that your Mr. Vance is right. Oh, maybe this was in response to J.D. Vance's quote. I do hope that you will repost this to let America know. So then it talks about the exploitation of this girl, because a lot of the girls that were targeted to be groomed were from troubled homes, right? They were vulnerable. So her father was an alcohol and heroin addict, and his drug dealers invited her to parties. So that's how they kind of got their foot in the door, this poor girl. They made her feel special. So it goes through what happened to her, absolutely horrific. And she was abused for 5 years by hundreds of men. She had broken bones, black eyes. She sometimes fled naked to escape. She was placed in care. By that, they mean like Child Protective Services, and repeatedly went missing. She and other girls like her were preyed upon as vulnerable girls lacking strong family support. Abusers posed as protectors or friends. She reported her abuse multiple times to the police and social services, providing evidence such as text messages. Cases were repeatedly closed with no further action. Authorities sometimes labeled victims as attention seekers, prostitutes, this is girls, little girls, or willing participants rather than victims of exploitation. In 2009, after repeated missing episodes, she was placed on police protection as a high-risk victim of sexual exploitation. 18 days later, police found her at a child sexual abuse party at a 60-year-old man's house with another underage girl. The man was not arrested, but Jade was. So she had just turned 16, according to some accounts. She was charged with causing or inciting another girl to engage in sexual activity. So she was accused of taking girls out to get sexually assaulted, but she didn't have a clue as to what was happening because she was herself groomed and trafficked and controlled by the gangs, and she reported this to authorities and they didn't do anything. So she was convicted, sentenced to 2 years, and she served 14 months in custody. She was placed on the sex offenders register for 5 years. Not one of the men who abused her was charged or convicted. So she described this as a horrific twist. The system treated her as a perpetrator rather than as a victim. And this case is part of the wider UK grooming gang scandal. So Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, others involving failures, etc. So people can read more about that if they are interested in reading about it. So yeah, so I'm hoping that you're understanding and seeing the patterns here, because the same patterns in the grooming gang failures were present in the case of Henry, right? So fear of racism led to victim abandonment and victim persecution. And we can see with Starmer's history, which I think matters very much because he was part of prosecuting the victims, that there's great public distrust right now in the leadership. And the grooming gangs, in my opinion, were the template for what happened, because the grooming gang started in the 1980s, and so did the cover-ups, because people were more afraid of being called racist by horrible people than they were of defending little girls and protecting little girls. So I'm just going to bring this back, not to end on a macabre note, but to remind everybody of the original reason for this stream is about, here we go. I'll just leave the picture there, about Henry Nowak. And you can see that horrible image. This was another victim of a Canadian victim. So this is an image that I hope will be seared in people's brains. And it's an image of him, in handcuffs. So he was murdered. He was slandered. He was slandered after he was stabbed, as he died, and after he was dead. Police treated him as a suspect while he was dying. Racism, that narrative overrode visible reality of somebody stabbed multiple times and stabbed in the face and bleeding to death. And BLM versus Southport shows the selective public order framing that Britons are being, are suffering under right now. And Southport shows the state failure to prevent violence and state aggression after public anger, and the way people are persecuted for pointing out the truth in the UK right now. And that victims are subordinate to the oppressor narrative and to all of these disparity frameworks. And Austin Metcalf and the way the media handles these cases is showing that there's a massive community relations machine that's working against the public interest of transparency and informing the public of what's happening, because they want to manage racial anger instead of dealing with the root causes and the systemic problems that our own institutions have created. So the grooming gangs show that the pattern has a history of decades. It's not a new thing. And that the censorship and emotional management, calling for community cohesion where there isn't any, it's theater. And in my opinion, the solution is truth, accountability, transparency, and equality before the law. And if that is not made a priority, and if our institutions are not restored, which is a massive undertaking, I'm not even sure how that would happen, I fear that things will get a lot worse before they get better. So on that depressing note, I'm going to end it for tonight. If you enjoy my work, feel free to donate. I always appreciate it. It always helps. I'm an independent journalist. Nobody pays me unless I'm freelancing. So I'm producing everything myself, and every little bit helps. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook. I have started recently on Facebook because I'm trying to reach a broader demographic. You can find me on TikTok, but much less because I get strikes a lot. And you can find me on X. And I also try periodically to publish on my broadcasts on Rumble as well, and on Spotify. But all of this takes a lot of work, so I do my best. But it's usually slower on those. So if you want to get things quicker, the lives always go up right away on YouTube and on X, and then I make reels and stuff later. I hope that everybody is doing as well as can be, and try and stay happy warriors, because as difficult as it is with these horrific cases, the public consciousness, in my opinion, has never been so aware of what is going on. So that's positive. And try and stay peaceful if you're out in the streets, and just keep fighting the good fight. God bless.